Welcome back to Lesson 8, Principles and Strategies for Successful Selection. You're going to want to dog-ear this in your workbook and make sure you come back to this and watch this video and study your workbook over and over and over again. This is where you really differentiate your hiring. It's the ability to ask great questions. So let's dive in. First of all, from a principle perspective, the best predictor of future performance is past performance in similar circumstances. We're looking to evaluate how somebody's acted in the past to predict, do we believe they'll act the same way in our culture, in our environment? And I believe Simon Sinek nailed it when he said great companies don't hire skilled people and motivate them. They hire already motivated people and inspire them. So think of our skill will bullseye that we're looking for here. We're looking for past performance that demonstrates they have the skills, the competencies, the makeup to do the work. And we're looking for past behaviors that demonstrate that they have the internal inspiration and motivation to overcome challenges and run through, over, or under walls to ultimately get the result. Principle number 2, the more varied the situations in which a behavior has been demonstrated, the more deeply rooted the behavior. And that's why you'll see these questions in this interviewing strategy interrelate, because we're looking for those patterns. We're looking to validate that these behaviors aren't a one-time event, but they're truly ingrained in the makeup of the candidate. And number 3, people reveal past patterns of behavior most vividly in instances where they have experienced, where they've personally experienced the greatest success in the most challenging setbacks. This is where typically you're running on emotion, right? You're not calm and well thought out. Things are happening and you need to react. And that's what we're looking to find out in these candidates. They can sit back in a comfortable environment and tell you what you want to hear. You're digging to see what really happens when stuff hits the fan or they have a real opportunity in their work. Now let's cover off on open-ended versus closed-end questions. Closed-end questions can be answered with a single word or two, or a simple yes or no, and open-ended questions are those where the listener is given a chance to explain, tell how they feel about an issue, or offer suggestions. Write this, highlight this in your notes right there. If you want to hire better, ask questions better. Questions are the key. They're your key to unlocking what's truly inside of that candidate. Now, we need to be careful with why questions, because all too often these questions can sound accusatory, and your listener, in your case, your candidate, can become defensive. So be careful with why questions and pay attention to how you're structuring your interview questions. So we're going to focus on a concept called behavioral-based interviewing. And behavioral-based interviewing is a technique that interviewers, that you as a hiring manager, can use to evaluate a candidate's past behavior and predict how they might perform in a new role. The questions focus on uncovering specific examples of how a candidate has handled a situation that is likely to come up in your organization. And so it follows this model. What was the situation? What was the action you took? And then what was the ultimate result? So just from a high level, to think about behavioral-based interviewing, the questions, number 1, should be open-ended. So we don't want closed-ended questions. The candidate should force, or the question, should force the candidate to provide a specific example. And again, let's go back to this format that we're following. What was the situation? What specific actions did you take? And then what was the outcome? What was the ultimate result that was generated? The question should prompt a response revealing the truth about weaknesses and strengths. Your best candidates are going to reveal weaknesses. Your candidates that are most likely stretching the truth are going to act like everything is rosy and they never have a problem. So we want to ask questions that give your candidate a chance to be truthful with us. The questions should differentiate between high and low performers. In other words, how do the best performers in our culture handle these situations? And let's try to find people that are already wired to handle the situations that way. And then this last topic, I see this almost in every organization I work with, is we ask leading questions. And we do not want to lead the candidate. I feel so strongly about this. I'm going to cover off on some examples. So think about what is wrong with this interviewing question. Listen, our corporate culture is highly collaborative and really based around teamwork. So tell me about your teamwork skills. Now, what's wrong with that question? And you may laugh, but I hear questions like this. In fact, I bet you're asking similar questions. At the beginning, you're nervous, you're kind of telling them all about your company and all the great things you do, and then you ask them to explain to you how they fit in with the things you told them that you already value. So the problem here is this is a leading question. It leads the candidate by telling them your culture is highly collaborative and you value teamwork. And not every culture is like that. Some cultures and some roles, value individualism and the ability to stay in your lane and the ability to get stuff done. So don't lead the candidate with that. Let's see what's in the candidate's head. So a better question might be, tell me about a time when you needed to engage others in the company to accomplish a specific goal. And a follow-up question to that might be, what was the ultimate outcome? Let's take another question. Tell me about a time when you had to adapt to a difficult situation. What'd you do? Now, a lot of you will look at that and say, well, Mark, that's a pretty good question. What's wrong with that question? Well, the problem is it leads the candidate by telling them that you value the ability to adapt when faced with a difficult situation. They may not always adapt. They may go around or find another way to get it without having to adapt. So don't lead the candidate with that question. So a better question might be, tell me about a time when your original plan failed. What did you do? And a follow-up might be, what was the ultimate outcome? And then I'm biased. I love candidates that love to learn. And I love to work with people that love to learn, that have a growth mindset. So a follow-up question to that might be, so what did that experience teach you? What was the lesson you learned there? And really probing to see, how do they learn and what do they get out of each situation? What part did they focus on that they took away as a lesson learned? Tell me about a time when you had to balance competing priorities and did so successfully. So what's wrong with this question? Well, the problem is it encourages the candidate to only reveal a positive outcome versus the potential for an outcome that was maybe not so positive. So a better question might be, tell me about a time when you had to balance competing priorities. What was your process for making the decision on how you were going to prioritize your time? And a follow-up might be, what was the ultimate outcome? What did the experience teach you? And one final question here, tell me about a conflict with a coworker and how you resolved it. And you might say, well, Mark, that sounds pretty good. But the problem is it does not differentiate between high and low performers. Not everybody resolves every conflict with every coworker. I mean, we'd love to live in a world where there was no conflict, but quite frankly, conflict in your organization can be positive. And sometimes conflicts get worked out and sometimes they don't. So I kind of want to get both sides of the story. So a better question here might be, tell me about a time when you were experiencing conflict with a coworker. What was your approach? And a follow-up might be, what was the outcome? And if they give you a positive outcome, I might say, can you give me another example where you were unable to resolve the conflict? And what did these experiences teach you? So again, we're opening up, we're giving ourselves a chance to learn, to get inside this individual and see what drives them, see what they focus on. Now, some probing techniques. An open-ended question is one of the most common ways of probing deeper. So we need to pause. We need to stop talking. Remain silent. Don't be so quick to jump in. Let the other person fill the silence by remaining quiet. And use paraphrasing to make certain you're clear about what the individual has said. These open-ended questions in behavioral-based interviewing are designed to help you learn what makes a person tick. See, so many hiring managers hire for skills, but people quit because they don't fit with the manager or they don't fit with the organization. So what I'd like to see you adopt is a philosophy of hiring for makeup. If you hire the people that are wired the right way, you can teach them the skills within your company. We've been very, very, very successful hiring for tangential talent. So maybe they've been in another industry, or maybe they had another role, wasn't this exact role, but they had the right makeup to be very successful in this role. And because they view it as a promotion or a step up, they come in with a level of energy and inspiration that oftentimes is way superior to taking somebody that had worked in another company or done another role in another way, who thinks it's going to be so different coming to your company. And maybe it is slightly, but at the end of the day, it's probably still a lot the same. So makeup is what we're really looking for here. So learning to probe and learning to go deeper. Tell me more about that. Tell me how that made you feel. Tell me what you learned out of that situation, or great questions to help you probe deeper. Now, in the next lesson number 9, I'm going to cover 2 high-value questions that most interviews never ask that will help you really take your interviewing to the next level. So again, star lesson 8, great gold in there for you to continue to work on. Lesson 9 will be equally value-packed. So I look forward to seeing you back here for lesson 9.